Pluribus Episode 9 has just been released on Apple TV, and the final episode of Season 1 brings things to a close in a strong way. It finds its power in uneasy conversations, unresolved longing, and the moral weight of choice. Carol's internal conflict between connection and resistance and love and autonomy reaches its most painful clarity here, and the hive mind's calm manipulation becomes more unsettling than any overt threat. Every small revelation feels heavy, every moment of intimacy feels conditional, and it leaves the story morally open, making it a finale that lingers not because of what happens, but because of what it asks Carol to accept or even refuse. So in this spoiler review and explained analysis, I'm going to be giving you my breakdown of Pluribus Episode 9, entitled La Chica O El Mundo, alongside discussing my general thoughts towards it. Before I get into it though, if you want to see much more on Pluribus, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating and subscribing to the channel. But without further ado, let's dive into my review and breakdown for the final episode of Pluribus Season 1. So episode 9 of Pluribus serves as the culmination of a season spent watching the series challenge what it means to be human in a world where a vast hive mind in the joined has enveloped almost all of humanity. The finale's title, La Chica O El Mundo, translating to the girl or the world, hints at the central thematic conflict here. And that is Carol's choice between her own deeply personal attachment to Zosia and the broader existential battle over humanity's future. When it comes to episode 9's opening, we don't jump straight to Carol or Manousos though, as instead we open in Peru, where a group of locals are getting Kusimayu, the young previously unjoined girl from episode 2, ready for a ceremony. She's clearly anxious, but there's also a sense of anticipation from her about what's about to happen. A van arrives, several joined people step out, and they hand her a sealed container. She breathes in what's inside, immediately collapses, and when she regains consciousness, she's euphoric like the rest of the joined. So this opening scene reveals that the joined have figured out how to integrate the unjoined into their hive mind. We've encountered Kusimayu before, as she was one of the 5 immune individuals that Carol met back in episode 2. You might also recall that she was one who was determined to join the others, motivated by her desire to reunite with loved ones who had already been absorbed into the collective. So this opening makes it clear that she didn't have to wait very long at all for that to happen. And by the time this episode began, we learnt that 71 days had passed since the initial joining back in episode 1, which means that the join developed a custom strain of the virus particularly for Kusimayu in a relatively short period. This also ties back to episode 6, where Carol uncovered 2 major truths about the others. One of those revelations was that the immune individuals couldn't be converted unless a virus strain was specifically engineered for them. And creating that strain required stem cells from the immune person, and crucially, those cells could only be obtained with the individual's consent. In other words, refusing consent meant retaining personal freedom. Keep all of this in mind though, because this detail becomes especially significant later on, particularly in relation to Carol. Anyway, we transition to the long-awaited arrival of Manousos, the persistent survivor who has been on his way to find Carol. His arrival in Albuquerque is not just literal, as it's narrative pressure on everything Carol has been wrestling with, both emotionally and ideologically. After weeks of isolation and resistance, Carol's relationship with Zosia has changed her, especially after witnessing something unnervingly human beneath when she shared a memory of the real Zosia last week. Zosia, as the Hive's representative, also shared intimacy, warmth and vulnerability in episode 8, and that has muddled Carol's steadfast mission to save the world. And Manousos' presence instantly complicates all this when he does arrive. Using a translator app to bridge the language gap, Carol tries to communicate with him, and their early interactions are tense, tingled with mutual distrust and an urgent need to ascertain each other's motives. As they talk, Manousos' paranoia about surveillance and hidden channels of influence drives him to a point of action. One of the episode's smaller but emotionally weighty details comes when Manousos searches Carol's home for bugs or tracking devices, a paranoid but human gesture that tells us how deeply suspicious he is. He finds a movement sensor hidden in her drink cabinet, which leads to a jarring revelation. Apparently, it was put there years earlier by Carol's late wife Helen during a difficult period when Helen was monitoring Carol's drinking while she froze her eggs. What this all transpires to, though, is a meeting between Manousos and Zosia while Carol sleeps. He meets with her in the neighbouring house, much to Carol's annoyance, and learns everything about the others before setting up an experiment. To do this, he enlists another member of the Joined and gets angry at them. As we saw back in episode 2, intense anger can disrupt the hive mind and trigger convulsions in its human hosts, and if the immune person's fury is strong enough, it can kill millions on the planet. So when Zosia lies down and suddenly begins convulsing in Carol's home, the danger becomes clear. A panicked Carol storms into Manousos' temporary space, scolding him for provoking yet another potentially deadly incident. But once there, we see the details of Manousos' plan. He grabs his portable radio and notepad full of signals from his ambulance, tunes into the only frequency that picked up a signal back in episode 4, which was 86130, and again sees that what was once static produces a clear audible sound. He returns to the house, tunes the radio, and deliberately provokes the previously calmed other by shouting at him and triggering another fit. He places the radio on the other and begins instructing them from inside their own mind to break free. It's left uncertain whether his experiment would have succeeded because Carol, armed with a shotgun, fires a warning shot above his head and forces him to stop. So in this moment, we get another show of Carol's ongoing struggle in disconnecting from Zosia and between autonomy and enforced unity. It's worth noting that besides the radio signal, the only other apparent way to possibly liberate infected individuals is by having them recall a deeply meaningful or favourite memory. For example, in episode 8, Zosia briefly snapped out of the hive mind when she shared a story about mango ice cream with Carol. So could Manousos and Carol combine this memory-based approach with the 86130 frequency to fully free people from the other's control? We're left with no answer, so I guess we'll just have to wait until season 2 to find out. Anyway, the emotional centre of the finale then turns inward as Zosia temporarily leaves after all this chaos. Carol is then thrust into a choice that Pluribus has been teasing throughout the season. Does she stand shoulder to shoulder with Manousos in a fight to dismantle the Joined, or does she build on the fragile, complicated connection she has with Zosia? Carol ultimately decides not to retreat into lone resistance, and she departs with Zosia to visit the last best place on Earth, a poetic and metaphorical description of the episode that underscores the themes of choice and meaning. This isn't just a physical journey, but a thematic affirmation that Carol is still seeking something beyond mere survival, and that is connection and purpose. Yet, as we learn, things don't wrap up all that neatly. For a few days, Carol sticks with Zosia, or them, because she still doesn't trust Manousos, especially after his recent reckless stunt, and because of her romantic connection with Zosia. Carol and Zosia leave Albuquerque and embark on a kind of improvised world tour with idyllic scenes of travel, skiing and spas, where the two seem to be weirdly building a life together. But beneath these serene shots is a creeping unease in Carol. While on vacation, the conversation between them turns to deeper questions, like whether Zosia ever loved before the hive, a moment that reveals Zosia's own sense of loss and complicates her seeming contentment. We learn that these memories now exist at a distance, softened and partially erased by collective consciousness. She doesn't deny love outright, as instead, she speaks about it in abstract terms, as if recalling someone else's story rather than her own. This reveals a subtle grief in that the hive has relieved her of pain, but it has also dulled the sharpness that once made love singular and personal. For Carol, this is unsettling because it reframes Zosia's happiness as something achieved through subtraction rather than growth. The moment complicates Zosia's contentment by showing that peace within the hive comes with a quiet cost in an erosion of emotional specificity. Yes, love still exists, but it no longer belongs entirely to her, and that realization fuels Carol's growing anxiety that intimacy under the hive isn't false, just fundamentally altered in a way that she may never be able to accept. And towards the end of their conversation, things then become too hard for Carol to overlook. She learns that the others have tracked down some of her stem cells and are in the process of creating a DNA-specific strain of the alien virus just for her. Many fans, including myself, have speculated that they might use Carol's frozen eggs, first mentioned in episode 3, and this turns out to be correct. Zosia confirms that the Joined have indeed harvested stem cells from her eggs to develop the targeted strain, and she warns Carol that it will take 1 to 3 months for the others to perfect it. So this shows that the hive doesn't feel it needs Carol's consent, and that this may have just been the illusion of choice. And unsurprisingly, Carol is furious towards this, leading to her returning to Albuquerque. This brings us to the ending of the season, where we find out that Carol is back on the side of saving the world with the absolute man that is Manousos. Upon returning to Albuquerque, Carol confronts Manousos again and declares her willingness to help him. But on top of this, she reveals that the large crate she brought via the helicopter that Zosia dropped her off in hilariously contains an atom bomb. She says to him, "You win, now let's save the world." So on one side, she could be saying it's an atom bomb metaphorically, but on the other, I think Carol is willing to literally blow up the world if they try and convert her. She has fully realised that her temporary affection for Zosia was a distraction. Again, she does like Zosia, but she wants her own autonomy, and the hive using her eggs goes against that. So in the broader arc of Pluribus, the finale of season 1 is less about providing closure and more about exposing the emotional and philosophical fracture at the heart of its story. Carol's journey so far has been one of relentless questioning, of psychological strain, and of grappling with a world that offers peace at the price of individuality. The finale pushes her into a place where she must reconcile her impulses towards identity, love, and autonomy with the stark reality that nearly all of humanity has already surrendered those things. The episode does leave us with a sign of hope though, both in Carol's bomb threat and Manousos' radio signal. The question is, will they get the signal to work, and does that temporary joy mean anything in the larger problem of billions being joined? We obviously do not know the answers yet, but I will be discussing my season 2 theories in the next few days, as I have a lot of thoughts on where this can all go. But overall, what were my thoughts on the finale of Pluribus season 1? Well, episode 9 serves as a thoughtful and quietly provocative finale for the first season. At one point in the episode, I was getting worried about how this was all going to end up, thinking they might not give us enough leading into the end of a season 1. But the final act of the episode really does pick up, and the path it puts us on with season 2 makes me hate that we have to wait so long for it. Throughout the season, Carol's journey has been one of isolation, grief, and fierce resistance to the alien hive mind known as the Joined, which has assimilated nearly all of humanity into a telepathic collective. We were asking throughout whether genuine human connection can survive in a world where minds are shared and individuality is increasingly optional. But now we question whether that is optional at all. This whole question resonates both in Carol's personal journey and in the broader narrative's exploration of belonging, grief, and what it truly means to be human. Also, the long-awaited arrival of Manousos injects a jolt of unpredictability to everything, just as Carol seems to be softening towards Zosia, another whose connection to the hive complicates everything she represents. What makes episode 9 compelling for me though isn't just plot development, but the emotional groundwork that it insists upon. Rather than a final showdown or payoff that we typically get in a season finale, we get a series of internal reckonings. Carol must confront why autonomy matters to her, what she's willing to risk for love, and whether resisting inevitability is itself a kind of life, not something to win or lose. Some viewers might find this frustratingly open-ended, but I think that that's also the show's strength. It refuses to reduce its themes to tidy binaries, and instead it invites the audience to wrestle with the costs of peace and the meaning of selfhood in a world where harmony comes at the expense of singular will. In that way, episode 9 extends an invitation into the deeper philosophical terrain that Pluribus has been charting all along, leaving its characters and its viewers suspended between possibility and maybe even inevitability. The trio of performances have to be praised here, and especially the awkward yet weirdly funny chemistry that both Rhea Seehorn's Carol and Carlos Manuel Vesca's Manousos bring to it. I cannot wait to see more scenes between them in season 2, and for me, it was the highlight of this final episode. So overall, season 1 was a strong start to Gilligan's new show, and again, I'm so bummed that we have to wait years to see where it goes next. But that was my spoiler review and explained analysis for Pluribus episode 9. I will be doing a video on my theories and predictions for season 2, so keep a lookout for that and stay tuned to my channel for more breakdowns on the show. But to those who have already seen the final episode of season 1, what are your thoughts on all the events that went down, and what are your current theories going into the next season? Let me know down below in the comment section. For much more videos on Vince Gilligan's Pluribus, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like rating and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.